Will the truth of Teresa Parker's parentage end up having ripple effects throughout the life of her brother Spider-Man? Well, let's hop into the pages of Giant-Size Spider-Man, the Chameleon Conspiracy issue number 1 and find out together, shall we? So then, picking up from where Amazing Spider-Man issue number 69 left off, 69, Peter Parker had enlisted the help of Ned Leeds to try and find Jamie, his kidnapped lab partner, who had been shanghaied into servitude by international assassin known as the Foreigner so he could make use of his future-telling device for his own evil ends. I must admit, Nick Spencer actually does a really solid job right out of the gate drawing some thematic comparisons between the loss of Ned Leeds, something that kept Peter Parker up many nights as one of his top failures, and Peter not wanting to lose Jamie here and now to add to the ever-growing list of people who have died under his watch. In fact, Peter seems to want to stop this from happening so badly, he's not really vetting Ned, who's come back from the dead just recently under some very, very suspicious circumstances. Now, by the time Spider-Man and Ned make it to the palace, the giant floating supervillain casino run by the Foreigner, there's already been something of an insurrection. A bunch of the villains have turned on Foreigner in an attempt to try and steal the future-telling clairvoyant device for themselves. Ned Leeds also breaks off from Peter pretty early on when they make it here, as he wants a showdown with the Foreigner himself, the man who is essentially to blame for his death originally. This means despite bringing him for backup, Peter is pretty much alone in trying to save Jamie from the other villains, but more on this in a minute. After all, this story is called the Chameleon Conspiracy, and we still need to deal with that. You'll recall at the end of the previous issue, Teresa had been taken by the Chameleon and his benefactor, the Finisher, aka the man responsible for killing the secret agent Parker parents. But they're not alone in whatever this weird place is. There's other chameleons there as well, and yes, after multiple issues of dragging it out and building it up, we finally get to realize what the hell is going on here. It seems that the Finisher had actually bought a young Dmitry Kravenov from his parents in hopes of turning him into the ultimate spy and infiltrator. Here's the thing though, Dmitry Kravenov was not alone though. There were many other children in this chameleon spy program. And it would seem that Teresa actually has some repressed memories of being in this school herself that are driving her absolutely crazy right now. Finisher lords a life-changing revelation over Teresa's head, saying maybe that she was just an orphan that he adopted and attempted to train to think that she was Peter Parker's sister. Maybe she really is the Parker's daughter and Finisher saved her from their crashed plane. Or maybe she's the offspring of two proto-chameleons from this secret spy project. Again, he doesn't actually give a straight answer to Teresa. In fact, Finisher and Chameleon go out of their way to poke several more holes into the new origin that she was given by Zdarsky in that short-lived series. You'll remember that Nick Fury gave her a picture of her with Peter's mom? Well, now the bad guys say, how do you know that picture was real? How do you know you didn't make it up yourself and attempt to keep yourself undercover like any good chameleon sleeper agent would? Heck, how do you know that was even Nick Fury who found the picture? After all, Chameleon can look and sound like anyone. Now, that's all a bit of a mind bender, but guess what? This story actually gets a little bit more complicated. You see, all those costumed villains who turned against Foreigner and tried to steal the clairvoyant device, turns out they're not actually regular supervillains at all. They're other chameleons who have gone undercover to try and steal from Foreigner. So what we essentially have here is a three-way fight between Spider-Man, who's trying to get back the device and also save Jamie, the chameleons who are trying to steal the clairvoyant device, and the Foreigner Chance and his henchmen who are trying to keep it for themselves. Ned, of course, almost ends up killing the Foreigner in a rage. Again, Ned used to just be a regular guy, but I guess the new revelations involving him consuming more goblin formula than we thought might explain why he has powers, and also might explain his newfound bloodlust. The villains are quickly abandoning ship, which means the palace is about to crash down in Manhattan and cause an untold amount of deaths unless our heroes can swing into action and stop it, which they do by putting their heads together. Jamie thinks if they can hook up the clairvoyant device to the palace's power source, then they can even things out and slow the crash. No, I'm not exactly 100% sure how that works, but that's the climax we're going with. Now back over with Teresa, she's naturally having one hell of a crisis right now. Is her whole life a lie? Has she been manipulated? Are these bad guys just lying to her now? Finisher and Chameleon say she'll never know for sure unless she's willing to do one job for them. And that is steal the clairvoyant device for them, which, wait, didn't they already dispatch a bunch of henchmen to steal it right now? Are they already so assured that they're going to fail in that plot? Or is this one of those uber complicated circuitous schemes where a villain is playing three-dimensional chess all at once? I'll let you decide. Spider-Man ultimately saves the day and stops the palace from crashing. This situation also gives Jamie quite a lot to think about. In fact, he basically comes to his own version of with great power comes great responsibility, and that seeing the future is way too much power for anyone like him to ever think that he could control. It's for all those reasons and more, Jamie ends up relinquishing control of the clairvoyant future-telling device to Spider-Man. After all, Spider-Man's the best dude in the world, and he should certainly know what to do with it, right? And what does Peter decide to do with this amazing power? Well, he figures it's too much for him to control either, and as such, he relinquishes it over to Teresa, his beloved sister and super spy, who surely would know better what to do with it. At first, Teresa is tempted to turn it over. After all, she spent so long hating the chameleon, and the idea that she herself could be like Dimitri makes her sick to the pit of her stomach, but ultimately she decides to do the right heroic thing. After all, no supervillains are gonna tell her who she is and who she isn't. If she says she's the sister of Peter Parker, then well, she is. And with that, we enter the big epilogue of this extra-sized issue. We check back on in with Silver Sable, who realizes that her boyfriend, the Foreigner, has been running around on her right now, making plans behind her back, and because of that, she opts to cut off his cash flow. Foreigner vows revenge on Ned Leeds and Spider-Man for this great insult and ends up hiring Taskmaster and Black Ant, two Nick Spencer favorites who we haven't seen in a little while. And finally, we have a story involving Kindred. You'll remember that he had escaped his prison a couple issues back, and it seems that he too is planning to meet up with Chameleon, who is just the most popular guy right now. It would seem that Kindred is in the market for some sort of serum that only the Chameleon can get for him, implying that maybe Kindred doesn't always look the way he appears to look. And it's on that note right there the comic comes to an end, everybody. And so that was giant-sized Spider-Man Chameleon Conspiracy issue number 1, and much like the other double-sized issues we've seen from Nick Spencer, this one was a lot to take in all at once. Don't get me wrong, I liked a lot of it. I actually thought Jamie and Ned ended up having some rather interesting character development in this issue, with the door left open that one or both still might end up being a threat later on. The army of chameleons turning on the Foreigner was actually a pretty compelling way to bridge these two seemingly unrelated stories. It's just it doesn't bridge them together that much. The story is called The Chameleon Conspiracy, and yet Dimitri himself is actually kind of a minor character in the proceedings. We were teased with a big revelation about Teresa Parker, but in the end, they only give us several options of something that could be, and then ultimately don't commit to any of them, while also kind of making the Chameleon himself a little less special because we know that there was a whole army school of them. There's this kind of inescapable feeling of rushedness going on with the story, like Spencer didn't have enough time to flesh it all out, or he really had to get it out the door and get started on Sinister War. Given that his Spider-Man run is ending quicker than expected and he's leaving Marvel after this run, I also have to wonder what sort of editorial backroom dealings were involved in this as well, like maybe Spencer wanted something different but they didn't let him have it. Furthermore, for all the big buildup of the clairvoyant as a future-telling device, as something that might very well be able to help Spider-Man down the line or doom him, they just kind of break it and it ends up not really doing anything important. The device ended up being just that, a device, which is a little bit disappointing considering we've been following the story of the clairvoyant and Jamie for a long time now. Overall, I'd give this one a 7 out of 10. It's a mixed bag.
Hey there everyone, it's your pal Cape Joel again, and if you're seeing my face right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, and I'll always be grateful for that. Retention helps in this crazy YouTube game, and so does becoming a patron. If you head on down to the description, you can find a link to my Patreon page. Recently just redid all the tiers, a lot of cool stuff offering up there, exclusive commentaries, exclusive polls, behind the scenes concept art for Capes and Quest. That's the brand new D&D show I've started soon. Never been a better time to become a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month and help the channel grow and, help me continue to deliver content like what you just saw. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.